No, no. Well, let me welcome everybody. Maybe we should do a couple of introductions since I don't know if everybody knows each other. Want to just introduce themselves and say what brought them? How about that? Hey, Rachel, how you
Hey,
doing?
good to see you.
Yeah.
I'm Rachel Ramoni. I have been attending this class for probably a couple of years now. And I am on the journey to convert, learning more every single day, and enjoy this class as a way to go from absolutely no knowledge to now feeling much more comfortable as a person who is on the path to convert.
Hmm. See, for you with so many PhDs, 2 years doesn't seem like that much.
That's right, especially and I took the long road to getting those PhDs, much to my parents' chagrin.
Uh, there you go. It's good to see you. It's been a while.
Nice to see you.
Adib, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone, my name's Adib. I'm from Pennsylvania and I'm just interested about learning about Judaism. And I started attending this class about a year ago. Early on, I wasn't attending consistently, but now I've been trying to be more consistent. I really enjoy it, and thanks to Rabbi Schaffner for that. So,
Cool. Madison?
Turn on my video. Hi, I'm
Hey.
Madison. I just started my conversion process this last month. So this is my first class with Rabbi Schaffner. So I'm really excited to be here. I've lived in DC for 6 years now, but only recently, the last couple of years, was exploring this and just I'm really excited to get this started. So yeah, thankful to be here. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Welcome, everybody. So we're in the month of Adar, which is last month of the year. As I mentioned last time, the this year, because it's a leap year, there's actually 2 months of Adar. And so it's the 12th month of the year, but this is going to be a 13-month year. And the reason is because the solar and lunar calendar are off by 11 days every year. And therefore, if you want Passover to keep falling out in the spring, which we do, because the Torah calls it the holiday of the spring, so you have to add, if you have 12 lunar months, you're only having 364 days, and 354 days. And so after a while, just like if you know any Muslims, Ramadan keeps getting earlier throughout the year. It used to be in June, July a few years ago. Now it's in March, eventually in January. But that for us, that kind of calendar for us, it's only lunar is not really tenable because our holidays have to stay within the solar cycle also. And therefore, we add a leap year every 3 or 4 years. We add a leap month, a whole month. And so this is the month of Adar. And Purim, which falls out on the 14th day of the month of Adar, celebrates Esther's and the Jewish people's victory over Haman, who tried to destroy the Jews. This was between it's either between the first and second temple, that 70-year period from 583 BCE to 530s BCE, or it's right after that. It could be that the second temple was already just rebuilt, and the story of Esther, of course, happens in Persia. And actually, I think I mentioned this. I was in Paris a few weeks ago in the Louvre, and I was walking through. You could spend weeks in there. I just happened to have looked at a wall, and there's like this mosaic of a lion. And I look on the little card next to it, and it says the this is the last known sort of remnant of the palace of Xerxes the First. Yeah, and and this was like found lying down, I guess, in Persia. He was the Persian king. And what I realized from the dates was that's Ahasuerus. He's either the king or the father of the king of who was the one in the story of Esther. And we still have like a wall from his mouth. And I'll show you actually. This is the photo. You can see it's like a lion made of stone. And here's what it says. Sorry, Darius the First. He reigned from 522 to 46 BCE. And 486 is when the story of Esther. So it could be Darius the Second, maybe it was, but the same palace. And this frieze is the only one whose original location is known. Decorated the north wall of the large entrance to the courtyard. And actually, there's a scene that happens in the Megillah, in the book of Esther, that happens in the courtyard of that palace, in which Mordechai, who is one of the heroes of the Purim story, is the uncle of Queen Esther. He hears these two people plotting against King Achashverosh, and he reports it. They're planning to kill him, and he reports it, and that gets recorded in the chronicles of the king, and eventually that really plays a role in the middle of the Megillah of saving the Jewish people, because Achashverosh reads. He wakes up in the middle of the night and he reads. He reads from his chronicles, and then he says, what have we done for Mordechai? He saved the king. Eventually, that's what leads the story of Purim. Now, in the Megillah of Esther, I don't think we went through the Megillah last time. In the Megillah of Esther, God's name is not mentioned. Megillah means a scroll, but it's not like a Torah scroll. Torah scroll has two handles. A Megillah, which means a scroll, has one handle. You roll it on itself, and you unroll it like this. And on Purim, one of the commandments on Purim is to read the story of Esther. Read the whole scroll of Esther. We do it twice. Do it once at night. This year it's going to be Saturday night. This Saturday night. The 23rd. At night, you can see on the Kesher website, or if you're not getting the Kesher emails, sign up for them. There's going to be a party that night. It's a party the next day. And holiday of Purim is a very strange one. It's one day. It's not like Shabbat. You're allowed to do labor on Purim, but it's a very, very happy day. And it's because the Jewish people's bodies were threatened on Purim. It's a celebration that's very physical, as opposed to Hanukkah, when their souls were threatened, when the Greeks wanted them to convert. So that is a celebration of the soul. It's not necessarily a commandment to have a party on Hanukkah. You light candles, which is symbolic of light of the soul. But on Purim, it's actually a mitzvah even to get drunk on. Not crazy, but drunk. Specifically on wine, because that was what happened in the story of Esther, and specifically at a party where you eat a festive meal on the day. And so we'll do that also. You can sign up for all those things on the Kesher website. And you can come and hear the Megillah read, which we're supposed to hear it read, the entire thing from a scroll in Hebrew, every word, at night and the day. And when they read the name Haman, who was the bad guy who tried to commit genocide against the Jews in that period, everybody sort of makes noise. Sometimes you see special noise. And people do dress up in costumes on Purim. It's not a commandment to do it, but it's a custom. Question, I guess, interesting question where it comes from. It could be that it's a holiday when God is hidden. It happens in exile, and perhaps that's part of the imagery of wearing costumes. The word Megillah means to reveal. Ligalut means to reveal, and Esther, the word Esther, means hidden. And so the Megillah, which doesn't have God's name in it, reveals that which is hidden. What is hidden? God. God is hidden in the world. And yet, the Megillah, because it happens in exile, when the divine is not as present, but yet, when you read the Megillah, you really see the hidden God. So maybe we'll look at the Megillah of Esther. It has 10 chapters. And it begins with this king, Achashverosh. and he rules over 127 provinces. Essentially, it's the Persian Empire. He rules over like most of the world, and it's in the city of Shushan. Now, this is in Iran, and the city is still there. It's called the city of Susa, but today it's not very big. In its day, of course, it was the capital. And actually, the Muslims there have preserved a site that they say is the grave of Esther and Mordechai. And so if you go to Iran, to Susa, you can. I think my uncle in the 1970s did. It was easier to visit Iran. And he makes a big banquet for everybody. For Shmonim Umat Yom, 180 days. That's a long part. And he invites everybody around. And then it says here, there was this sort of blue wool, cotton, and fine linen. And then it says gold and silver. And it says Kelim Mikelim Shonim, and it was vessels from, here it says Kelim Shonim. That could mean various vessels, but it could also mean ancient vessels. And there's a tradition, and I think Rashi quotes this, that that these vessels were actually, is not quoted, but the Midrash quotes it, that these vessels were vessels from the temple. That's what he was using, the Jewish temple. Because the Babylonians had conquered the temple, the Persians conquered the temple. And that's all within a very short time. And so there's a tradition that this party isn't just a raucous party, but on some level, there's an anti-Jewishness. And there's an enormous amount of wine. And then there's this woman, Vashti, his wife, and he commands her to come out. The Midrash says he wanted to put clothes on. She refuses. And the people are just, it's a very, it's not very, not very politically correct. It was ancient Persia was very, basically everybody gets together and says, "Oh, bring out Vashti," and but she refuses to. It's a whole midrashic tradition why she refused to. And then they all say, "Well, Vashti, the queen, is going to disobey the king. That's it. It's everybody's going to want to disobey their husbands, so you better kill Vashti." So indeed, he kills Vashti, and then he has to find a new queen. And so they put out the word, "We're looking for a new queen," and then Mordechai, who is Esther's uncle, says to there's a few lines that we say out loud when we're reading the Megillah. And so the person reading it is going to stop at this verse, and everybody will say out loud in Hebrew, Ish Yehudi Hayab Shushan. There was a Jewish man in the capital city of Shushan. His name was Mordecai. And then the person who's reading it reads with a sad tune, Asher Haglam Yerushalayim, who was exiled from Jerusalem with the exile of King Yechonia of Judah. And they were driven out of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, Melech Babel, the king of Babylon. Right? So that was 70 years before this, or 60 years before this. The Jews are exiled to Babylonia. That's why the Jews are in this story of Purim. That's why they're in Persia. And so Mordechai is part of the exile. And he says to Hadassah, Esther has two names. Esther's name is Esther, and also Hadassah. And she didn't have parents, and so Mordechai adopts her. And he says to her, you should go. They said, okay, all the single women, I guess, or actually the Midrash tradition, married to Mordechai, they all have to go. And so, of course, he finds Esther to be the right one. He finds her pleasing. And she doesn't tell him that she's a Jew because Mordechai told her not to say it. And every day Mordechai would go to the courtyard and he would ask how Esther's doing. And these women, would each go in turn to see the king. And then they would go back. And then it tells us that Esther was taken to King Achashverosh on the 10th of the month of Tevet, which happens to be the 10th month. I'm sorry, in the 10th month, which is the month of Tevet. So that's not long before Purim. And he loved her, and he made her the queen. He tries out all these women. He loves Esther. And Esther did not tell, the Megillah tells us again that Esther did not say. And then it tells us the story that I just mentioned of Bigtan and Terah, two of the king's eunuch servants that guarded the threshold, and they were plotting to do away with the king. Mordechai learns of it and tells the king and saves the king's life, and that is reported. So that was he's in the Chatzar, Yoshev Bashar Hamelech. He's in the gate, in the palace gate. That was what I showed you. And afterwards, then it sort of switches scenes, and it tells us there's this guy Haman and Haman, and the king makes Haman one of the heads of the empire. And what does Haman want? He wants one thing. He's very angry that Mordechai will not bow to him. So Midrash says that Haman had an idol around his neck, wanted everybody to bow to him. Mordechai would not bow. And so Haman becomes angry and he wants to get more of that. And he says to the king, Yeshno Am Echad. There's one nation that is mifuzar u'mifarad beina, that it is scattered and dispersed among us in all of your kingdoms. V'datehem shona, and their way, their religion, their laws are different than everybody else. And they don't keep the king's laws, and the king should not tolerate them. This is like really classic anti-Semitism, right? It goes all the way back to this time. Mordechai is very much associated. Haman is called Haman, the son of Agag. Who is Agag? So Agag was in the story in the book of Kings. Saul was supposed to destroy Amalek. There's this nation Amalek. It attacked the Jewish people in the desert, and the Torah tells us there's this sort of battle between God and Amalek for generations. And there's a commandment to kill Amalek. And Saul, the king, the first king of Israel, doesn't do it. He kills Amalek in a battle, but then he leaves the king Agag living. And the prophet Samuel says, you've done the wrong thing, and he takes away the kingship from Saul. But Haman comes from that remnant of the tribe of Amalek, comes from Agag. And Haman in the Megillah itself is called Haman, the son of Agag. And so that's who Amalek is, a nation who's, whenever there's lots of times in Jewish history when people have wanted to convert the Jews forcibly, right? The Christians did that in Spain. Muslims did that many times. Morocco and Egypt, and lots of times that Jews were forced by the sword to convert. But that's one kind of anti-Semitism. There's another kind of anti-Semitism, which is genocidal. They just want to kill all the Jews. It doesn't matter what the Jews believe. They can convert all they want. It doesn't matter. And that of course, in the modern day, that was the Nazis. Nazis didn't care if you had converted to Christianity. They killed you anyway. They didn't care if you were legally Jewish. In terms of Jewish law, it didn't matter. If you had a great-grandparent who was Jewish, that's it. You were going to be killed. because for the Nazis, there was a sense that the genocide of the Jews is how you make the world the place it needs to be. And that's not new. That goes all the way back. That's the midah, that's the characteristic of Amalek. That sense it goes back to the Torah, where they attack the Jews for no reason. They attack the weak first in the desert when the Jews come out of Egypt. And it's classic Haman. That Haman just wants to kill all the Jews. Why? Because they're Jews. Right? That's what he says to the king. He says, they're among us. They're different, right? It's what we see now a lot of times in terms of anti-Semitism, of this sort of conspiracy theory, that there's some kind of Jewish cabal and the Jews are spread among us and we got to get rid of it. Right? That's this law. That's Haman. And that's what's going on here. And that's what he says to the king. He doesn't have a good reason. He just says, these people are different. They're other. They're not us. And they're spread among us. So we got to. And so he says, listen, if it's good in your eyes, draw up a command to kill them. And not only that, I'll pay you 10,000 pieces of gold and pieces of silver if you do it. And the king says, oh, great idea. So the king, it's an interesting question, the character of Ahasuerus. He sort of comes off as a bit of a buffoon. And he takes off his signet ring and he puts it on Haman's finger. And then Haman can make decrees. And the king says, the money and the people are yours, do what you want. Gives him permission. And they write these letters. On the 13th day of the first month, the king's scribes were summoned, and they issue this decree. There's all these letters. There's certain imagery in the Megillah. There's wine parties, letters that get sent out to all the jurisdictions. And so when we read the Megillah, we fold it like a letter. It represents this concept of letter that gets sent out, right? And it's sealed with the king's signet. That's what Haman does. And it gets sent out to all the countries of Persia, that they should exterminate the Jews, old and young, women and children, on a single day, on the 13th day of the 12th month. And Haman has thrown lot in order to determine what day to kill the Jews. Let's see what it is. Oh, that's where we were. So just before what we were reading, it says, in the first day of the year, in the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of the king Ahasuerus, he killed Pur. So Haman cast lots. He created a little lottery for himself. It's a goral, which means a lottery. There's another word for lottery that's used here, which is Pur. Pur. So he sets it up so that he can pick one of the Babylonian months, which are actually the same as our months. That's where we get the names of our months, and a day. And what he comes up with is the 13th day of the month. And the word used for lottery here is Pur. And later on in the Megillah, it tells us that the holiday is called Purim because Purim means lot, lottery. And Haman cast lots in order to decide what day to kill all the Jews. So it's sort of a funny thing, right? The name of the holiday Purim comes from the word lottery. Why is it called lottery? Because Haman cast a lottery to figure out what day to kill all the Jews. It's a very strange thing, right? Why didn't you call the holiday? The obvious name of the holiday should have been the holiday of Esther. That would have made a lot of sense, right? Or Mordecai, it's called the Book of Esther. Well, the Book of Esther, why don't you just call the holiday Chag Esther, the holiday of Esther? Purim is very strange. I'll show you where the Torah says, where the Megillah says that it's called Purim. This is at the end of the Megillah, chapter 9, verse 26. Cain, therefore, it says at the end of the Megillah that the Jewish people won against their enemies, and they hung. There was a gallows that Haman wanted to hang Mordechai on. Instead, Haman got hung on the gallows. Cain, and therefore these days are called Purim, because of the lottery. And in view of all the instructions, the letters, it's a little bit strange. Why? The question, I think, obviously, why is the holiday called? I mean, what in the world? I mean, why call it lottery? Why is it a lottery? The randomness of the lottery that Haman casts in order to decide what day to kill the Jews, that's so central. I mean, what is that about? So some explain that Amalek is not just about killing all the Jews. Amalek has a certain belief in the world. Amalek believes that the world is random. There's a randomness, right? That's why Haman uses a lottery to decide. So it's so right. It's sort of the banality of evil, like Hannah Arendt said. You know, it's you want to decide what day you're going to do a genocide. How do you decide? Random. That's crazy. I mean, it's like here's the most dramatic thing, and it gets decided based on randomness. That somehow is an element of Amalek. That Amalek does not see a world with a rhyme and reason. See a world that is godly, that has somebody run. But rather, the world is random, and so it's up to us to make ourselves right. It's the will to power. Right? It comes up with the Nazis also. Right? What moves the Nazis? It's because we are better than everybody else. In other words, if there's no reason for morality, so then it's everybody for themselves. And it's whoever's there's somehow meaning in getting rid of in me, the Aryan. And for Haman, it's him. And so King Ahasuerus gives him the petition. And they write these letters. And Mordecai, he mourns.
Can I ask a question
Please.
about the lots? Is it about the randomness? Or I guess when I read it, I thought maybe he viewed it as, a kind of divination to,
Interesting.
connect up with whatever viewed as
he's looking for meaning there. That's
or to be guided by,
something.
unseen forces.
Huh. Interesting. That's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting. Right. Sort of sorcery.
Yeah, or sort of whatever sort of gods he worshipped, sort of leaving it to their will.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, that could be. Maybe that also is the opposite of monarchy. No, sense talisman or leaving it up to the will of the universe. I mean, that's right. No, we believe that human being is here to change the universe. Human being is here not just to not just to human being is here to create morality. Human being is here with a certain mission, right? It's different than this idea that somehow inherent in universes. I hear what you're saying. Yeah, that could be. So then, Mordecai, it sounds like Esther doesn't really want it. And Esther says, I can't go to the king. The king hasn't called me. And, if I go to the king and he hasn't called me, he'll kill me. Right? He sends a messenger to Esther to command her to appeal to the king. She says, how can I appeal to the king? The king hasn't called me. I'd be taking my life. And so Mordecai says, tell Esther, al tidami v'nafsheh. Don't imagine that you will escape. Because if you're silent in a moment like this, deliverance is going to come to the Jews from somewhere else. In other words, God's going to deliver the Jews. This is your moment to save them. Umiodea, who knows? Imla'id kazot. If not for this moment, he got malchus. This is why you begin. It's an interesting message, right? You have to know, why am I in this? What's my mission? And so he says to Esther, like, you can't just not do it because you're afraid. Who knows? Maybe this is why you're the queen. Maybe this is why this is working out this way. You're there. It's an interesting thing, when to take responsibility. Sometimes we are thrust into. My son this morning was in Israel, leading a birthright trip in Israel, and he was in a coffee shop this morning at 6 a.m. And the person in front of him was an army officer dressed in uniform. And a terrorist came into the coffee shop and grabbed the army officer and started stabbing him. And my son was right behind him. So my son jumped on the terrorist and tried to grab the knife. And the army officer was able to stand up and shoot the terrorist. And the army officer died. This happened this morning. If you go on the Times of Israel, you'll see it. There's a video of my son taking down the terrorist, so that the army guy could get out. And it's funny, we never know when we're just sort of thrust into life. As it just goes on until the moment when you have to act. And you don't think about acting anymore. You just either jump in or you don't jump
Oh my goodness, this happened this morning?
in. Yeah, I'll show you the video. Crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I
I
was going to say too. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, so I was just gonna say I searched it up while you were talking about it. It's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, my friend's actually on that trip because she had mentioned, oh, I think your
Seriously?
rabbi's son is leading the trip. So I should
What's your
probably
friend?
text her.
Somebody else was with him in the coffee shop from the trip.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
what's your friend? Wow, your friend's on that trip? So
Yeah, her
fun.
name's Liat Berkowitz. I don't know if you know
Wow,
Peter Berkowitz at Hoover, but that's his niece.
heard that name. Huh.
Oh
This
my
was the
God.
soldier. And this is, I think, the videos. Here's the video. It's two different videos. One's clear. That's my son.
Your son's in the stripes, Rabbi?
Yeah,
Oh
and
And
my
that's the woman next.
oh my, wow.
God.
That's the soldier. He's ran crazy. And I have the video without the blur.
Thank God your son's all right.
Yeah. I mean, but it does sort of highlight for you, let's sort of bring up the question of why. Like, obviously, all of life is sort of why. But it's close to home. Makes you really think. Like, I mean, right. You know, we don't have we have much less control than we think. And so we never know. You know, who knows why you're at a certain place at a certain. So, I'm not saying we can ever make sense of it. You know, can't make sense of it. You know, that guy did not. My son, certainly didn't deserve more than that guy. I mean, I'd say that. But the you know, it's an interesting question. How do we learn from Esther? When do we act? Right? I mean, Esther says this isn't going to work, and Mordecai says, you know, if you're put in a certain position of power, that means that you have a mission. You have there's something you need to do. I think we believe that as Jews. And you know, if you believe that there is a rhyme and reason, there's a God, then you know, especially if like, you know, I mean, the Jews believe that God has a program for the world. God has a moral imperative for the world. He gave the Torah. God didn't just create the world and let it go. You know, the Torah is the thing that guides us through how to do what we do, to sanctify. Doesn't mean we're always perfect at doing it, but that's what Mordecai tells Esther. It's interesting that Esther doesn't get that. Right? Esther has to be pushed because it's very hard. So Esther says, I've been quoting this since October 7th. Esther's response to the Jews being in total danger is, go assemble all the Jews. Go and gather together all the Jews. And fast. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night and day. They have this is very hard. I don't think we could do this. They have a 3-day fast without food or water. That's not from dawn to dusk. That's 24-hour fast. And she says, I and my maidens will do the same. And with that, avo el hamelech, I'll go to the king. And I'm not really allowed to go, but I will go. Asher avadati avadati. If I perish, I perish. She puts herself on the line for the Jewish people. And the Midrash says that whenever it says the king in the Megillah, it doesn't refer to Achashverosh. It's referring to God. And so, right, she's saying, like, you know, fasting and prayer is imperative here. You know, that is how we respond to tragedy, difficult. In fact, there's an opinion of Maimonides that real prayer is only obligated in the time of difficulty. And so Mordecai does that. And then Esther goes, this whole thing she does, and she goes to the king. The king says, yeah, what can I do for you? And she says, listen, I want to invite you and Haman to a party, a wine party. Again, the wine party. Mishteh Hayayin, wine party. And that's why we have a party on Purim. And so she invites him to this wine party. And then she says at this party, so Haman is upset. He's really thrilled that he gets invited to the party, but just can't shake the fact that Mordecai won't bow down. And then we're at precisely the middle of it. Megillah has 10 chapters. This is the beginning of chapter 6. Chapter 6, which is precisely in the middle, begins with, on that night, the sleep of the king was disturbed. Is that Pharaoh's asleep? Is that the sleep of God? Whatever that means. You know, when the Jews are in a time of tragedy, is fighting. And he says, you know, bring the Chronicles, the king of Persia says. And they read about how Mordecai helped to save the king's life. And the king says, did we ever do anything to thank Mordecai? They say no. And he says, okay, tell Haman to come. And Haman thinks, oh, the king wants me. He must be wanting to give me honor. And the king says, take the royal clothes and put on Mordecai and lead Mordecai. Right. So there's sort of this word about Purim, b'nafochu. It says later on in the Megillah, everything was changed from mourning to joy, from difficulty to goodness. And that's what happens in the Megillah. Everything changes in the blink. Right? Esther says, bring all the Jews together. It's with that unity that everything changes. And so now, instead of Haman being honored, it's Mordecai all of a sudden. Haman and Haman leads him through the streets and says, such is what is done to the man in the kingdom. And then they go to the party, and Esther says to the king like walks out, and Haman, she says to the king, listen, somebody wants to kill me and all my people. And Achashverosh says, who wants to do that? And she says, this guy, Haman, the one who's at the party with us right here. And the king gets angry, walks out of the room, and then Haman goes to beseech Queen Esther, and he's sort of sitting on her couch or whatever, and the king walks back in and he says, hey, what are you doing? And the king wants to get rid of Haman. And so Haman, and somebody points out that Haman has already made a noose, a gallows for Mordecai, and put him on. So the whole story has changed, and basically they can't undo the decree of the king to kill the Jews, but what they can do is arm the Jews. So the Jews are armed, and they can fight back against their enemies, and they're very successful, and they kill a lot. And Haman has 10 children, and they are all. And there's letters sent out again with the king's thing that the Jews can fight. And the Jews had goodness on that day. And the fighting goes on an extra day in Shushan, capital city. Therefore, we have a tradition that all walled cities like Shushan, Susa, have Purim on this, not the day of Purim, but the day after, 15th. So if you go to Israel, in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem is on Purim is on the 13th of Adar and the 14th of Adar, but in Jerusalem, it's on the 15th. Walled cities that were walled in the time of Joshua, they have Purim on the 15th. There's some other cities like Hebron, maybe Lod, those cities that were walled from ancient times, like Shushan, they and then here are the 10 sons of Haman that are, and we say them in one breath when we eat it in the synagogue. Yeah. And then the Megillah tells us that the certain commandments. Therefore, the Jews make the 14th day of Adar a day of Simcha u'Mishta, a day of joy and Mishta, of drinking. The Yom Tov, a good day. Mishloach manot ishloehu, sending foods one person to another. So one of the commandments is to send 2 foods to one person. There's a sense of that all the commandments of Purim are about Jewish unity, right? We're all eating one big meal. Foods given to somebody else. And you have to also give money to the poor. So those are the 4 commandments. You read the Megillah, you have a party, you give food to each other, and you give money to them. And the day was turned around from sadness to joy. Matanot le'Avyonim. And Esther writes down this story and decrees that each year this should be. Esther, the queen, the daughter of Abihail, wrote this, and Mordecai, Jew, wrote this. Ready? They sent letters to everybody about this holiday. This holiday should be every year. And Mordecai came second to the king. And at the end of the story. So, any thoughts or questions about Purim or the Megillah? Any thoughts or questions about Purim or the Megillah?
Well, first, I'm still sort of stunned that you're so composed with this having happened to your son.
I mean, he's, he seems okay. He went to the police station for 3 hours and got debriefed, and then got back on the bus with his group that he's leading.
Wow.
Seems okay. I don't know. I'm not there. Will he have some kind of lasting something?
Very, very impressive. Shifting from that sort of stunned state to a question about the fast of Esther. I know, I think this year Purim starts on a Saturday night, right? And so I assume one wouldn't fast on Shabbat, but
So we fast on Thursday. So why don't you fast on Friday? Because we've already put it off. We don't want to fast on Friday because it will make Shabbat some days. So we put it off to Thursday. It's not the most important fast, so moving it's not a big deal. And so we fast from dawn to the dark on Thursday. And then about half an hour after Shabbat ends, we'll go back to the synagogue. If you go on the Kesher website under calendar holidays. And then Saturday night, there's a party mostly. There's two Megillah readings. There'll be one at the synagogue. And then one at the Westin, mostly young professionals. And then there's a party. It's billed as young professionals, but I'm going to go. It doesn't matter what age you are. That's at a bar downtown. We'll be bringing kosher food there. And you can sign up for that on the website. And then during the daytime, we'll read the Megillah in the morning. It's also a women's Megillah reading, a Megillah reading for women, just by women, read by women. I think it's at 10 a.m. on Sunday. And then there's going to be a Purim party with food and stuff. And that will be in the same location as last year, which is on the 6th Street in a party room at one at the building across from the building across from Stevens Park. And you can sign up for that also, and that'll be, I think, at 6 p.m. So there's a lot happening. If you look on your email that you get from Kesher, you're right. And but Rachel's alluding to that we do fast every year the day before Purim. It's called the Fast of Esther. In memory, we don't do a 3-day fast. In memory of the fast that Esther made the Jews fast. And it's interesting that Yom Kippur, which is called in Hebrew Yom Kippurim, the day like Purim, even though Purim comes thousands of years later, on Yom Kippur, you eat the day before Yom Kippur and then you fast. Special mitzvah to eat the day before you fast on Purim, fast, and then you eat. So, some people think there's a lot of comparisons between Yom Kippur and Purim. It seem like it's the day we fast, one the day we eat. But something very deep about both of them. In a certain way, one is atonement and coming closer to God through fasting, but as Jews, we believe you can also come close to God through the opposite, through joy.
I had a general question about fasting days. Because I know I've only done it for Yom Kippur, which I know involves, I think, much more like different traditions. And I'm not sure with other fasting days throughout the year, are there certain things we should be aware of that we should be thinking of? Or, for example, is there anything in the Siddur in the morning we should pray in addition to what we're doing?
There are some special prayers. So, we have 4 fast days a year that commemorate the destruction of the temple. And then we have Fast of Esther. And then we have the fast of Yom Kippur, and they're all a little bit different. They, but on those other fast days, we do have some special prayers. There's a special prayer that we say in the afternoon in the Amidah, silent prayer. There's a prayer that we say, we inserted into one of the blessings of the Amidah, and it's about the fast day. It's about fasting. And else we got to, so that's a special prayer. Obviously, Yom Kippur is totally different. It's a lot of prayers. But yeah, on fast days, a certain one. We also say, there's another prayer that we also say in a fast day called Vinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, Siege God. Yeah, so there are. So yeah, if you have not been to the synagogue on Purim, it's good. Part of whatever you can. And it's probably not so many religions that have celebration in which it's sort of the deepest day, but it's also a day of parties. After the Talmud says that the Jewish people accept Torah. Talmud says that the Jewish people stood at Mount Sinai, they had no choice but to accept the Torah. But it was as if God put the mountain over their head. So the Talmud says, well, when did the Jews volitionally accept the Torah? Talmud says on Purim. As it says in the Megillah, Akimu v'kiblu hayhu, Jews accepted upon themselves the holiday of Purim. And it says, no, it's referring to the Torah. Because when God is hidden, right, it's the opposite of Mount Sinai. God is totally hidden. God's not in the book. You accept God, when God is on Mount Sinai, you have no choice but to accept God. That's not what you accept. When God is hidden, which is, of course, our entire world, that's the real. So Purim, in a certain way, is most important. Even though it's a holiday, everything's hidden, right? It looks like a big party, but of course, it's just the opposite. The same thing about the Megillah. The Megillah looks like there is no God, but every line is God. Every line, if you read it, everything works out. It's our world. Our world is the world where God is hidden. And yet, if you look close, stand back, like, oh, everything's a miracle. Everything's there. The Jewish history. So in a certain sense, Purim really is the Jewish message. More perhaps than Yom. Very easy to engage with. Purim, it's a little hard. That's the question. And God, eating it in a mild state of drunkenness instead of letting it become something, unholy. You find holiness there. All right. Have a good Shabbat, everybody.
Thank you.
Shalom. Thank you. I'm glad your son.
Thank you.